So there are a lot of considerations for removing and installing a motor in this particular truck. As you can see, it sits way back underneath the engine. I did this mostly myself. I had a master mechanic friend that came by to help on occasion. You will have to remove the valence there, just to buy yourself that extra 5 or 6 inches, because what you don't want to have to do is remove the whole front end and core support. So what I ended up doing was taking out the fan shroud radiator. You'll need a special tool to remove these transmission lines. I machined my own out of a couple of pieces of small diameter pipe. You could probably grind the end of a little piece of pipe and try to do it the same way yourself, and then set the piece around this pipe and push it in with some channel lock. But if you can afford the tool for $10 or $12, that's probably the best way to go about it. No issues there. Regarding getting the motor out, there are some issues with the mounts. It's not designed to let the motor just pop on out of there. You have to raise it up a certain amount in order to get the mounts to clear the housing for it. It's sort of built like a cup, and the mount sits inside. So you can lift it up to an extent, move it forward to an extent, but you kind of can't do both at once. Likewise, the motor mounts that I bought for this were slightly different than what was included. So I ended up having to drill the housing right here to accommodate the bolt. It was pretty simple. I actually cut it with a plasma cutter first and widened it up. Obviously very stable. Nothing you really have to worry about. Oil pan, I imagine that you could have oil pan issues depending on what vehicle you get it out of, or if you want a high performance oil pan, especially if you're keeping a 4-wheel drive truck like I am. Everything else fit down there pretty well. The only thing that I really had to swap off from the other motor is the oil filter housing little situation there. The one that the oil filter with the if you've had one of these trucks for long enough, one of the only things that really has ever failed on it has been the gasket that holds the oil filter housing on there. You'll need to make sure that whatever you are putting on your new motor kind of fits your old situation. Also, I think the F-150 oil filters might be bigger than the ones for the Mustang, so you'll want to take advantage of that extra capacity if you're able to. Of course, when you take it out, power steering pump, always a pain in the ass. You got to unbolt that, leave that laying over there. Same thing with the AC compressor, way down yonder on the bottom. The belt was like 1 inch longer on this motor than it was the 2-valve. I actually had to kind of look online and compare belt length measurements before I found out which year F-150 belt would actually fit this particular motor. Water lines, of course I chingulate those, getting them in and out, because that darned plastic factory fitting thing on there isn't worth the shit. So I have had to make these custom adapters just to be able to use, or the custom hose barbs to be able to use hose that I had laying around to make it work. You may not have that luxury. If so, you might be able to get away temporarily with some maybe 3/4 inch or 1 inch PEX fittings or something like that, until you can find a hose or a 90-degree adapter or something to kind of dress that in properly. I didn't worry about it because I'm getting ready to take the front of this motor back apart, vacuum and such. I actually had a situation where I had a blowout and it ripped out a bunch of the vacuum lines for my 4-wheel drive on this side. So I ended up capping off quite a few of them and just kind of doing what I could to make them work. But as far as vacuum goes, you might have some spaces over here where you might have to get yourself some T's and get you some nice fittings TMN. This is the EGR wiring harness that I left here because I tried to use the map input from a separate map sensor. Mounting the motor. Of course, you'll be removing it and installing it with the intake off. It's very easy. One thing you'll need to be sure of is that there's a ground on the back of each cylinder head. Way back there in the corners. You'll definitely want to make sure you got good access to those before you put the intake on. Big issue was the fuel line. The original car, or the original truck, the fuel line went all the way to the back. This particular motor stopped right here. I ended up having to TIG weld a piece of, like cut one off the old motor, TIG weld it onto here. Also, so this being a 2-valve before, it had the very much preferred giant aluminum intake on it, but it still had the little power improved, you know, door on the bottom that swings around. And so I've still got the wiring harness for that, just kind of tucked back in here. The new engine, this one comes with an IMRC, which I imagine you'd be able to adapt to work off of that same wiring, but since I knew I was going to boost it, I went ahead and ripped that stuff off of there. Brake vacuum, you still got vacuum lines in the back of the motor in the same spot. One of these came off during the time I was working on it. Cost me like a whole day to get that back together. It took half the skin off my arm. You don't want to deal with that. So if you could put a little clamp on that, maybe even some RTV, you might want to give that a try. Mounting the power steering pump, or the power steering reservoir. You'll see I made this bracket here to kind of bolt into where the old factory airbox used to be. I had a little fluid leak. The cap wasn't fitting on there very well, so it's a little bit, the paint's already sort of worn off of it. I went with one of the like an AFR, Airflow Research, like $100 cold air kit off of eBay, and it was great. Had almost all the pieces I needed, except for adapting the actual math, so I had to reuse my old part. I also ended up reshaping these lines multiple times just to get them to the angle that I wanted, not resting onto the radiator pipe. Additionally, you'll notice there is not enough room here to allow the 90 there for the intake to sit properly. That was a temporary problem as well, because as I said, I'm planning on doing a lot of things to this. By the way, okay, so that pretty much covers getting it in. Let's come back and talk about the electrical.